Your head is pounding. Your joints ache. Your body feels like it is being pressed into the ground. There is no pharmacy. No doctor. No antibiotic. Just the forest, the cold, and your band of a dozen people huddled around a fire. What do you do? For most of human history, this was not a hypothetical. For 300,000 years before hospitals existed, before germ theory, before anyone understood what a virus was, your ancestors got sick. They ran fevers. They broke bones. They suffered infections, parasites, tooth abscesses, and injuries that would send a modern person straight to the emergency room. And yet they survived. Not always. But often enough that you exist. Which means they figured something out. The question is what? The first thing to understand is that your ancestors were not helpless in the face of illness. They were extremely good observers. They spent their entire lives watching the world around them. They noticed which plants made an animal behave strangely after eating. They noticed which berries caused vomiting. They noticed which leaves, pressed against a wound, seemed to slow bleeding. Over tens of thousands of years, this observation became knowledge. And that knowledge was passed down, person to person, generation to generation, in the form of practice. This is not speculation. We have evidence. In 2017, a team led by researcher Laura Weyrich published findings from dental calculus, the hardened plaque found on ancient teeth, recovered from Neanderthals at El Sidrón cave in northern Spain. What they found inside those ancient teeth was remarkable. Poplar bark. Yarrow. Chamomile. These are not food. Poplar bark contains salicylic acid, the same compound that forms the active ingredient in aspirin. Yarrow and chamomile have been used for thousands of years to reduce inflammation, settle nausea, and fight infection. The Neanderthals at El Sidrón appear to have been consuming these plants deliberately. Not for nutrition. For relief. This was not a fluke. One of the same individuals whose teeth were studied also showed signs of a painful dental abscess. He had a gastrointestinal infection. And his dental calculus contained the exact plants that modern herbalists would prescribe for those specific symptoms. He self-medicated. Roughly 50,000 years ago. But it goes further than plants. Your ancestors understood something that modern medicine spent centuries forgetting and then slowly rediscovering. Community is medicine. When a member of your band fell sick, they were not isolated. They were not told to suffer quietly in a corner. They were cared for. And the evidence for this is some of the most quietly extraordinary data in all of archaeology. Meet Shanidar 1. He was a Neanderthal man found in Shanidar cave in northern Iraq, excavated by Ralph Selecki beginning in the 1950s. When he died, Shanidar 1 was older, likely between 40 and 50 years, which in Neanderthal terms was genuinely old. But here is the remarkable part. His skeleton tells a story of damage and survival that should not have been possible without help. He had a withered and likely amputated right arm. He was partially blind in one eye. He had healed fractures across his skull, foot, and ankle. He suffered from degenerative joint disease severe enough that walking would have been painful and difficult. None of these injuries killed him. They all healed. A one-armed, partially blind, lame Neanderthal does not survive in the Ice Age wilderness by himself. He survived because the people around him kept him alive. They shared food with him. They may have chewed food and passed it to him when he could not process it alone. They protected him, moved camp at a pace he could manage, and kept him near the fire when his joints swelled. Shanidar 1 is not just a skeleton. He is proof that ancient humans practice something we often assume is a modern invention. Care. So how did a typical episode of illness actually unfold? Imagine you are part of a band of around 25 people, moving across open woodland and grassland in what is now East Africa, roughly 100,000 years ago. One morning, a young woman in your group wakes with a high fever. She is shivering despite the morning heat. She cannot stand without swaying. Someone brings water. Someone else disappears into the tree line and returns with a bundle of bark and leaves. An older woman in the group, one whose knowledge of plants is deep and inherited from her own grandmother, begins to work. She strips the inner bark from a tree. She makes the sick woman chew it slowly. She prepares a preparation of crushed leaves to press against the woman's forehead. The sick woman is placed in shade but not away from the group. She is watched. What the older woman knows, in practice if not in language, is something that modern medicine formalized only in the 19th century. Fever is a response, not just a symptom. Heat kills pathogens. The body's temperature spike is not the sickness failing, it is the immune system fighting. She does not try to stop the fever. She manages comfort around it. She keeps the sick woman hydrated. She ensures she eats something small. She watches for the signs that mean the fever has gone too high. She has seen it happen before, and she remembers. This level of knowledge was not accidental. Archaeological evidence of plant use in medicinal contexts stretches back across dozens of sites. One of the most compelling cases is Ötzi the Iceman, the naturally mummified man who died in the Alps roughly 5,300 years ago. Ötzi was found carrying 2 pieces of birch parleypore mushroom threaded onto a leather cord. He had an active intestinal infection caused by whipworm at the time of his death. Birch parleypore contains compounds with documented antiparasitic and antibacterial properties. He was not carrying those mushrooms for decoration. He was treating himself. A man from the Copper Age, walking through mountain snow, administering targeted antiparasitic medicine from a cord around his wrist. This is the part that changes how you think about ancient illness. Your ancestors were not passive victims of disease. They were active, intelligent, deeply observant practitioners of what we would now call empirical medicine. They tested. They remembered. They taught. They refined. And when a treatment worked, it was passed forward across generations like any other essential skill. What happened when the medicine was not enough? Burial sites across the world reveal something important about what ancient humans did when illness won. The dead were not abandoned. They were placed carefully, sometimes with food, sometimes with tools, sometimes in deliberate postures suggesting rest. At La Ferracie rock shelter in France, multiple Neanderthals were buried with their bodies arranged with clear intentionality. At Sungir in Russia, children buried 30,000 years ago were found wearing clothing sewn with thousands of ivory beads, a burial preparation that took someone many hours, driven not by ritual obligation alone, but by grief. When someone died despite the group's efforts, the loss was real. The grief was real. The care did not end with the final breath. There is a modern assumption buried in how we talk about prehistoric medicine. We assume that because ancient humans lacked laboratories, they lacked understanding. We assume that because they did not write things down, the knowledge was thin. But that assumption collapses when you look carefully at what they actually used. Many of the plant compounds your ancestors discovered through observation, salicylic acid from willow and poplar bark, quinine from cinchona bark, morphine precursors from the opium poppy, were eventually isolated, synthesized, and placed in the small orange bottles you buy without thinking. The plants came first. The science came centuries later. The observation was ancient. The model your ancestors built for treating illness was not purely botanical. Rest. Warmth. Water. Shared food. Physical touch. These are not primitive consolations. They are interventions that modern medicine has since quantified and confirmed. Warm environments reduce metabolic stress on a feverish body. Hydration is essential to immune function. Social contact lowers cortisol and stimulates immune activity. Rest allows the body to redirect energy from movement to repair. Your ancient ancestors did not have the vocabulary for any of this. But they practiced all of it, every time someone got sick. That aching, feverish feeling you get, the one that makes you want to curl up under a blanket, stay close to people you trust, and drink something warm, is not weakness. It is an ancient program running in your biology, written across hundreds of thousands of years of sick ancestors who survived because someone noticed, someone helped, someone knew which bark to strip from which tree. The world is full of pharmacies now. But the first pharmacy was a forest. And the first pharmacist was someone who paid close attention. Your head is pounding. Your joints ache. Everything in you wants to stop and be still and be cared for. That instinct is older than language. It kept your ancestors alive. It is keeping you alive right now.